Can we just take a moment to appreciate that he does this himself? He tucks himself in. Sometimes I can't find him because he's completely tucked into a blanket, but he's just the cutest freaking thing. Okay. Yes, baby, you're cute too. This is my baby. It's my baby. Okay, now that we've taken time to appreciate two of my children, hi guys and welcome back to my corner of the internet and YouTubes. I did my nails. I absolutely hate them, but I just want to get into a quick recap of everything I read in the month of April. I read 8 books and had 1 DNF. I don't even know what inspired me to choose the DNF book that I chose, but we'll talk about that later. So here is a quick recap of everything I read in the month of March 2024. Alright, we are starting off strong, and like everybody else, I did read House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. I also read House of Sky and Breath last month. In February, I reread House of Earth and Blood, and I just wanted to reread the other two before I jumped into House of Flame and Shadow. Crescent City is not my favorite world in the Maasverse, but since I did read everything else by her and the worlds do collide, of course, I'm going to read through these series. It is an emotional roller coaster. I do cry for the first and the second reread of House of Sky and Breath, and House of Flame and Shadow hit me just as hard. Not everything is as nicely tied up in a bow as some people say it is, but I did enjoy both of these, even though it is my least favorite Maas verse, but that's just because I'm not a huge fan of urban fantasy. But I don't want to talk too much about this because BookTube and BookTok and Bookstagram are full of reviews about Crescent City, and I think you get the gist of what's going on there. I also did jump on the bandwagon and pick up Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I have not started Iron Flame yet. I'm probably going to pick that up next, even though I started reading another book already. So I'm going to start reading that after the book I'm reading right now, or maybe simultaneously. But Fourth Wing, I did enjoy. I did not pick this book up when it came out because the reviews were bad. They were not good reviews, and I kind of felt like I was being tricked into a cover buy because of the sprayed edges, and I was just like, they're just trying to get me to buy this not great book because it's a pretty book. So I didn't buy it. I missed the sprayed edges, but eventually BookTok actually convinced me to pick this up. And it was fun. It's not the deepest fantasy. It's a fun, quick read. I enjoyed it. I enjoy the dragons. I think I scored this a 3.5 or a 4-star just because it's fun. And sometimes you just want to read something fun. There is death. There are spicy scenes. It is dark. It's not like a whimsical ride. It's a dark fantasy. It's just a quick one, and it's made for new adult, I believe. But I do like our characters, even though they can be kind of irritating. But I want to see where the story goes. I have been kind of spoiled a little, but not to the point where I'm not gonna read it. So I'm looking forward to picking up Iron Flame next. So Fourth Wing was either a 3.5 or a 4-star. I'm not sure. I have to check my story graph later, but I did enjoy this. I also do not have a physical copy of it because I did listen to it on audiobook, but I listened to Golden Sun by Pierce Brown, the second book in the Red Rising trilogy. I know the first 3 books are a trilogy and there's 6 books and a comic book, but I think there's the first just Red Rising trilogy, and then you could end it there if you wanted to. This is a military, I don't want to say it's a sci-fi, it feels more like a military space fantasy, and I really am enjoying it. It feels completely different, even though it's connected to Red Rising. It feels completely different from Red Rising. I'm very glad I wound up picking this up, even though it has been years since it came out. It is not what I expected. It's not following these Hunger Games tropes in a dystopian future that I pictured. It is a military fantasy. There are very high stakes. You see the domino effects of things that happen to these characters when they are very young, trickle into decisions they make into the future, and they are traumatic. And I wanted to read something a little chill, and I think in the first chapter in this book, about 840 something people die. Just like, I can't snap my fingers, just like that. So, loved this book, a little traumatized by it. It's something that I'm a little wary of picking up the third book, only because I know it is going to be dark. A lot of things happen. I don't want to talk too much about the second book because it will give away spoilers for the first if you've read the first, but our characters have become more violent and more manipulative, and every connection is very tenuous. Like anything anything can break these people apart, and loyalties aren't what they seem they are. And I just loved this story. I love the behind the scenes manipulations in the military tax and in the government, and I really am enjoying this story, and I can't wait to see what comes in Morning Star in the third book in the series. But I am going to wait a little bit before I pick that up. But Golden Sun, definitely, I wouldn't say it's a favorite, but definitely glad I picked it up and read it. Once again, every month I try to pick up either a classic, a modern classic, or a nonfiction, and this month it was The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. And I wanted to love this book because I know about the history of the book. I know how important it is. I can't stop doing this whenever I have nails, I'm sorry. And I know how important it is. I know about Mikhail Bulgakov's life. I know about the history of this novel, about how he burned the transcripts, about how he rewrote it later on, about how it was written in Soviet Russia. It is a satire about Soviet Russia when the devil, in my last video I said death personified. It's not. That was a misstep on my part. It is when the devil comes to Soviet Russia and he starts like meddling in the lives of artists and publishers. And this book, I wanted to enjoy it more than I did. It made me feel dumb. And I know that's because I don't read a lot of modern classics, but because I had to keep going to reference tools and even to my old theology books from college, I didn't enjoy this. I felt more like I was studying the book than reading it for enjoyment. So I want to just rate this 5 stars because I know how important it is and because it is a classic. But for me personally, my enjoyment, it's going to be a 3 just because I have a hangover from this book still, and I don't even want to pick up a classic this month because of the mood this left me in. It didn't really pick up for me until chapter 13. And that says a lot because immediately in the book, somebody gets killed and has their head lopped off. And it still didn't pick up for me until chapter 13. And that is a long way to go in a book that's only about 370 pages. So I don't regret reading it, but I wish I had enjoyed it more, or I wish I was in the headspace to have just gotten more out of it than I did. Oh, I'm gonna mispronounce this woman's name and I am sorry, but another book that I read on my Kindle that I did not get a physical copy of is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This has been sitting on my TBR since it came out. It is a literary fiction. It is about a woman. She's affluent. She has an apartment, I believe, in New York. She doesn't need a job. She's very beautiful. She has the easy life, but she's kind of jaded to a point where she doesn't like or appreciate the life she has, and she essentially takes a year off of life. And I'm not talking she just stays in her apartment for a year. She medicates herself to borderline being comatose. Like, she's out of it, and she knocks herself out for a whole year. She's not asleep. She does go around. She does walk around. She does cause chaos, but she basically breaks herself down to the bare minimum of what she needs to survive, to be born anew towards the end, to find out what matters to her most. And this is kind of an exploration into like us as people. But I think for me, once again, this isn't really my style of book to read. I did walk away from it just like, what the hell did I just read? And as someone that wants to disassociate and that does disassociate because of my brain, this had a lot of triggers for me. I know I don't need trigger warnings in book. It won't leave me crying in my bed or anything, but it did have me thinking for a very, very long time about kind of reestablishing myself and figuring out what's important to me and what in my own life. And I don't think this book was supposed to be self-reflective, but it was. And maybe I'm not the audience for it, but I don't even want to rate this book because it's so not for me, but I'll say 3 stars. I know a couple of years ago, Bookstagram really loved this book. I know the girlies really loved this book, but it's just not my cup of tea. But I am a fantasy reader. I'm not a literary fiction girl, so take with that what you will. Did I even try to say the author's name? It's Ottessa Moshfegh? Oh wow, I'm sorry. And this book I definitely do not have a physical copy of, and that is A Fate Inked in Blood by Daniel Jensen. This, if I had bought it, would be a cover buy. I think this will get better. I really hope this gets better. This is a book based on our Shield Maiden Freyja. It is based on Norse or Viking mythology. She is a shield maiden with a drop of God's blood. We follow her on this quest from becoming this fishmonger's wife to a hero. And there's a love interest that's very tangled up. We do see her growing up. She's a full-blown adult, but we do see her growing up and discovering that she makes terrible decisions, that her love interests are just, I just got so agitated. At the beginning of this book, I thought everyone was wrong. I was like, this is going to be 5 stars. She's great. The love interest is hot. The story seems to be going in the right direction. And by the end of it, I just wanted it to be over. But the world building is so good. And we do see growth from our main character. So I do think that the second book in the series will be better. And I am going to pick it up. But I'm just not... I don't recommend this book. I'm not going to recommend this book until the second one comes out. It is a beautiful hardcover. And that's the reason that I almost bought it to begin with, and I'm glad I didn't, because if I don't like the second book in the series, I'm gonna stop right there. But gonna give the second book a shot because there is character development, very little, but there is some, but not. I don't even know if I can rate this a 3 stars just because I got so disappointed. It was a disappointing book. I think everyone that's read it that I've seen agrees on that. So all right, we are ending the month on a high note with the 2 last books. I'm not gonna rate either of them a 5-star until I've read the next in the series, because I do think how the story continues kind of affects where the story comes from. But first up is the new darling of Book Talk and Bookstagram, and that is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. From the first few pages, I knew I was gonna love this book just based on the storytelling and based on our female main character, Rave. She is an assassin. She has a terrible attitude. She has a chip on her shoulder. Our love interest, and he's nice. I like our love interest in this one. This is my favorite book boyfriend. This love interest in this book, he's my favorite. And I am a fan of Akatar, so that is saying a lot. Resand who. But we follow each of these characters. They're on their own individual quests, which do bring them together. She's more hesitant to let her guard down, and he just wants to fulfill this quest that he's been on for a while. And I don't want to talk more about this book because I did do a whole video on it, reviewing it and giving a synopsis without spoilers. I don't think I gave any spoilers, but 4.5 just because of time. I don't really understand the concept of time in this book, and it did throw me off a little, but definitely a new favorite book, a new favorite world, potentially a new favorite series. We'll see how book 2 comes. I did check Sarah Parker's Instagram, and she is currently writing the second book in the series. I cannot wait for it to come out. I think this is self-published. I think she's a self-published author, so there's not going to be a deadline for when this has to come out. So we'll just have to wait and hope. And this is so good, and I love the dragons, and I love our character, and I love our side character, and that ending, the ending of this book is not something I see a lot in... I don't know if this is young adult fantasy. I don't think it is, because that ending is not something we see in young adult fantasy. It is not. So read the prologue, read the epilogue, pick it up. It is the new darling for a reason. If you like Throne of Glass, I'm not going to say if you like Akatar because it's not the same, but if you like Throne of Glass, this is it. This is your next favorite. Just grab it, trust me. And then the last book I read, 4.75, because I want to see how the spider goes. And because I like the female characters fell flat, but that is The Wolf by Leo Carew. This is the first in, I believe, a trilogy of, I'm gonna call this anthropological fantasy, because this is an exploration into what would, I love this book so much. This is an exploration into what would have happened if 2 different species of humans would have evolved at the same time. It's actually 3 different species, but we don't see the 3rd species in this book. So we have 2 different species of humans. They have evolved. It is essentially the Dark Ages, and they are at war with one another. And we see culturally how they've evolved differently based on their biology. We've seen how they treat one another, and it's just very interesting, not just from the reading the fantasy point of view, but also from the anthropological point of view. I did pick up my fiction book my nonfiction book for this month, Sapiens, because I just enjoyed this book so much. I've already picked up The Spider. I'm going to be reading it this month. I love this book so far. I can't wait to see what happens. I'm not a fan of the female characters. I'm not a fan of how they were discussed. but I'm in love. I think this is going to be a new favorite series. The last 2 books I read this month just encouraged me to just pick up so many more books. And I'm so glad I ended the month on a high note. I do recommend those. I do recommend Fourth Wing, and obviously I recommend Crescent City. Urban Fantasy is not my favorite, but it's Moss, and she can do no wrong. I do love those books as well. And that is everything that I read in the month of March 2024. I'm going to get back to reading and walk my dogs. I will see you guys next time, and thanks for hanging out.